And what we got in Los Alamos was this great secrecy that came into this sacred place that we knew to be alive and a whole being. It was a darkness that came in.
In a few days. In peace, this incredible energy opens limitless horizons.
They speak openly of seeking a Nobel Peace Prize for the nuclear weapon.
I was astounded to see my face in the mirror and felt as if the ground was collapsing around me.
Leave the uranium in the ground. It's the only safe place for that radioactive stuff.
Secrecy and sacredness cannot walk hand in hand in this world.
The latest figures I saw on how much it's going to cost to clean up the nuclear mess in the next 70 years is $300 billion just to try to take care of the nuclear waste. That's cheap nuclear power? You gotta be kidding. It's just absolute curse. Good afternoon, Los Alamos Sales. This is Ed Grothus at the Black Hole. Hi, Greg. When are you coming up? I'm going to use these steel balls on one of my sculptures.
The Black
here.
Hole. Once a supermarket, it is today a meeting place, a gathering point for those sharing a particular interest. Owner Ed Grothus resells salvage from the Los Alamos National Laboratory. It affords a living that allows him to go on fighting for the end of nuclear weapons production. From scrap metal, he fashions memorials to peace.
All over the entire surface of this sphere, completely cover the sphere here. And this whole thing will be mounted in this BBT. All these practice bombs will be all around this. It'll make a 20-foot flower.
For over 20 years, Ed built bombs as a mechanic at Los Alamos National Laboratory. He quit when the United States entered the Vietnam War. He quit his job, but remained in Los Alamos with his family. In a community that fears criticism, the pacifist gadfly Ed Grothus is a lone, admonishing voice. The Black Hole's clientele range from scientists to hobby craftsmen, from film prop people to inventors, from anti-nuke activists to anti-nuke artists. The old man calls himself Eduardo de Los Alamos. To the inhabitants of Los Alamos, he is the fool on the hill.
You know, I have all the artifacts of the nuclear age. The museum downtown, the Bradbury Science Museum, they have a few things, but I have all the artifacts of the nuclear age. That's part of the nuclear business. That part of the business evolved right here in Los Alamos. This is a section of the Black Hole that I call a nuclear section. I refer to everything in here as nuclear waste. There's nothing radioactive. Radiation is easy to detect, but all of this is waste from the nuclear business, so it's nuclear waste in a different sense. I've been here over now 52 years. I was 52 years here on April 23rd, and I saw in the lab expensive equipment being salvaged, and I started buying it, and it's just grown, just piled up higher and deeper all the time. I have to go to another box and put on some lights. These people are looking for high pressure valves, and they're clearing the back, and I have to put on lights for them.
The eastern edge of the Jemez Mountains, the route to Grotius, the road to Los Alamos. Since 1957, anyone can stroll around Los Alamos. But that doesn't make it a normal community. There is no real downtown. The heart is, as the locals call it, the lab. The sprawl of buildings is now part of the University of California. Financed by the Department of Energy, the Los Alamos National Laboratory is one of America's leading scientific research facilities. Nuclear weaponry design and maintenance consume 70% of the lab's annual budget. Half of the community's 19,000 inhabitants work for the lab. Los Alamos loves superlatives. It can boast of having the highest per capita concentration of PhDs in the United States. No matter which direction a visitor turns, the town's historic past is commemorated. The Bradbury Science Museum proudly displays replicas of the bombs that destroyed Hiroshima and Nagasaki. August 1945. Victory in the Pacific, the end of World War II. The myth of August is never questioned. Since then, since the dawn of the bomb, nuclear arms designers and gene technicians work in neighboring offices and laboratories. The lab is proud of the part it has played in the Human Genome Project, its contribution towards deciphering human DNA. Ashley Pond was the center of the historic laboratory grounds. After the lab was moved, a park with sculpture garden was built around the pond. Unchanged is rustic Fuller Lodge, a former Boy Scout getaway. Here the scientists and engineers spend their leisure hours. At the Historical Museum, one can step into the past, relive the days when MPs kept the secret city sealed from the outside world. Those who lived here felt themselves to be America's chosen. Confidently displayed are the symbols and texts of the worldwide anti-nuclear and peace movement. Made palpable between these narrow walls is the atmosphere of the early 40s. Here, the nuclear nightmare was born. The Adams military use was first contrived in the remote highlands of New Mexico. Worried that the Nazis might unleash a secret uranium weapon, the American government in 1942 authorized the building of the bomb, an undertaking carrying the codename Manhattan Project. General Leslie Groves placed the nuclear physicist Robert Oppenheimer in charge. Recalling from his youth a Boy Scout camp lost deep in Indian country, it was Oppenheimer who picked tiny Los Alamos to headquarter the project. America's leading physicists were gathered and, together with their families, transported to the remote location unknown to any map. The address of this secret community was a simple post office box. P.O. Box 1663, Santa Fe, New Mexico. On the mountain, a weapons laboratory sprang up almost overnight. The Manhattan Project also marked the beginning of a new academic era. Scientists closely watched over by the military, executing the government's will. Their jobs were top secret. Not even with their wives could they discuss their scientific work. only a few had any inkling of the project's end goal.
Here it is, General Groves, plutonium.
Well, that's the first I've ever seen. But after this, if you don't mind, I wish you'd hold something under it, because after all, there's about over $50 million in that tube.
The lab sees a great future in plutonium. I see no future at all in plutonium. I have a can of organic plutonium here, fat-free, wheat-free, dairy-free, 100% natural, no artificial colors or flavors. I sent some of this to the president, to President Clinton and to Vice President Gore 2 Christmases ago. And my cover letter said, if you eat this, you'll walk with a halo. If you give some to Sox, the cat will walk with a halo. And the Secret Service showed up here. They wondered if there was any insanity in my family. They wondered, what's this guy doing? You know, they took it as some kind of a threat. And it was really just a joke gift.
Yeah, and it's going up, remember. It keeps, and it's...
A friend of mine, he worked with me for many years, and he first called it the black hole. Seemed that everything came into this place and hardly anything went out. Essentially in the cosmos, that a black hole is gathering everything in, and that the gravitational attraction is so high that not even light can escape from a black hole.
Lovely, lazy Santa Fe. Chilies, red or green, extra hot. Frontier romantic, brick oven baked. Adobe buildings, earthy, weathered, and on the street corners, Indian kitsch. Here the nuclear physicists first arrived. Today, Santa Fe is a focal point for alternative lifestyles and new age thinking. Nothing confides that to the north, only 30 minutes away, lies the Los Alamos National Laboratory. On Saturdays, organic foods jam-pack the farmer's market. Hip and carefree Santa Fe. An idyllic facade. Few who live here willingly speak of Los Alamos, although many are employed there. Then, suddenly, at a liquor store, we find a memorial to the past. La Bomba Grande at $10 a bottle. Where does that red wine with the atomic mushroom come from? The answer to our question leads us back to Los Alamos, to a former Manhattan Project chemist.
When it came time for the 50th anniversary of the lab, which was April 1993, okay, I wanted to do something, and it's sort of traditional in wineries to make commemorative wines. So I thought about making a commemorative wine. Los Alamos was like a college campus during the war. The average age was something like 26 or 27. So it was a fun place to be. We had parties on Saturday nights, and we always made Purple Passion. Purple Passion started with a 32-gallon GI garbage can, clean. You added lab alcohol, which was free, and you added to that grapefruit juice and grape juice. And then, to make it a little interesting, you threw in a block of dry ice to make it smoke.
The flash was later calculated to be brighter than 1,000 suns. Miles away, a young girl, blind from birth, saw the flash.
When the thing finally went off and it came up above the clouds, there was this big cheer. There must have been 100 people up there. So that made everybody pretty happy.
Few people laughed. Few people cried. Most people were silent. I remembered the line from the Hindu scripture, the Bhagavad Gita. Vishnu is trying to persuade the prince that he should do his duty, and to impress him takes on his multi-armed form and says, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds."
So we came back, and of course in a few days the bomb was dropped on both Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and before long the war was over. Look, deterrence worked all through the Cold War. How close did we get to some things? Look at Cuba, for example. Yet deterrence worked. For over 40 years, there hasn't been a world war. And you can't say that about the previous century. Why? Because of nuclear weapons, fear. That's why I believe in nuclear weapons.
We're trying to control the world by deterrence, and deterrence is controlled by fear. And the fear, of course, is Los Alamos' nuclear bomb. And this begets terrorists. We've got to learn to make those people our friends. We've got to help everybody. It's a Christian philosophy. Love your enemy. Do good to those who hurt you. You know, but when I say these things here in Los Alamos, there's a dead silence. Nobody argues with me when I say, you know, the real disaster occurs if a bomb goes off, not if one doesn't go off. There's complete silence. And I'm unique here. I'm the only one. If I wasn't here, there wouldn't be anybody here to talk like this. They'd go about their business just like they went about the business of the concentration camps in Germany. Nobody said anything. Very few. At one time, I went to the local council here, and I said, in order to make people understand what we do here, we've got to do something. And I suggest that we rename all the nuclear capitals of the world. Any place that has anything to do with the nuclear business gets a new name. And I said, what should it be named? Or were there places like this before? And I said, yes, there were. The concentration camps. The people worked in secrecy. They didn't go home at night and tell their wife what was going on. It's just like here. The people work in the lab, they work in secrecy. There's no point in telling their wives about the bombs or whatever it is. And so what we should do is rename all the nuclear towns in the world. And since Los Alamos was first, we get first choice. And we become New Buchenwald, or Buchenwald II, or Nuevo Buchenwald if you want, Buchenwald Nuevo if you want to keep the Spanish vernacular. And I said the Russians can have second choice, they can have Auschwitz II, Bimel in France and Aldermaston in England, they all get named in honor of the... And then people will really realize what's going on.
Greg Mello was an environmental inspector for the state of New Mexico. When he discovered how carelessly the federal laboratory disposes of toxic and radioactive wastes, and how powerless state officials were to do anything about it, he quit his position and founded an independent institute to monitor the laboratory, the Los Alamos Study Group. In Los Alamos, the name Greg Mello stirs up little sympathy.
Los Alamos is a generator of ideology, lies, basically about history, lies about the present, lies about the future. What Los Alamos has done is to create another version of history. When we started the Los Alamos Study Group in 1989, when the Berlin Wall came down, our goal was to transform the laboratory into a civilian organization, or else just downsize it almost away. We were aware that these laboratories were what was holding up the arms race as much as anything else. And if we did not address them, the arms race would regenerate.
The lab officially encourages open public dialogue. At the same time, it reacts poisonously to any outside criticism. In 1991, when the New Mexican published a report detailing the radioactive contamination of Los Alamos and its surrounding canyons, both the paper's editor-in-chief and the article's author were fired. The lab's commentary: nuclear waste is no more dangerous than other types of waste. But why are so many still living former employees deathly ill today?
When I think back at the labs, and I think about all the workers like my padrinos that have made sacrifices, we didn't know what those sacrifices were. Until now, we know them so much better, because last March we heard one after another testify that I worked at the labs for so many years, and now look at me. I'm a physical mess.
I got beta contamination, beta gamma contamination, exposure, beta gamma exposure, and I live with cancer of the liver. It's a rare type cancer. And right now it's in remission still. I have problems. I had to go in for biopsies, and I suffer from internal bleeding, lots of different medications. And where I was working, there was no safeguards to protect me from exposure. Los Alamos doesn't have like a conscience. When it comes to the human factor, they just sort of like, they top it off and that's it. They just gave me like a little pension. It's almost embarrassing to say the amounts of money they're giving me, like $500 a month, and that's it. I live working little jobs, and their lab doesn't really care. I mean, it's like a big place. You think they take care of their people, but they don't. I'm just another, almost like they would have packaged me and buried me like a contaminated thing.
A Geiger counter and caterpillar probed the site. Decades ago, tons of radioactive waste simply buried. No maps exist marking the waste locations. In the tents of Area G, scientists, shielded by protective white uniforms, supervised toxic waste storage. Doing the dirty work, the Indians and Mexicans wore no protection.
Here were these very loyal individuals, loyal second-class citizens that were, out there fighting a war and risking their lives. And they come back, and yes, they are given opportunities like this job at the labs, which paid better than at the state or other different places that they could have worked. But there was a sacrifice. It was a hidden sacrifice. They didn't know what they were getting into, but they stayed loyal.
In March of 2000, the US Department of Energy, hoping to quell mounting public disapproval, invited the victims to a hearing. Hundreds of radiated workers came. Each was limited to a speech no longer than 4 minutes. A disquieting picture emerged. If the case were too potentially incriminating, the victims' clinical records would vanish. A lab physician asked one worker if he practiced witchcraft at home, because only such could explain his current state of health. Those who wished for judicial redress had little chance. No attorney wanted to take on the laboratory.
Mercury is a heavy metal. It'll find places in your body. Once it's inside your body, it'll find places to hide that you can't get rid of it, and there's no getting rid of it. It'll be with you forever.
Alex Smith was lucky to meet the workplace health researcher Ken Silver. Thanks to Silver, Smith's mysteriously missing clinical records reappeared.
Why didn't they check us out? Why didn't they monitor our situation? Why didn't they take care of us? The more I talked to myself about that, the more upset I became, and I went to see a lawyer in Albuquerque named Leon Taylor, and I told him the same story I'm telling you. At first he agreed to take my case. I was going to sue the laboratory. And then I got a letter from him about a week after that saying we don't have a chance, that the statute of limitations has gotten us, and he didn't want nothing to do with the case.
Has anything changed in Los Alamos? Society has certainly changed around Los Alamos. In private sector companies, you wouldn't have found a mercury still after 1970. You would have found hazard communication, worker right to know, material safety data sheets, and training in place by the early 1980s in private sector companies in America. Los Alamos is behind by about 10 or 15 years. Material safety data sheets didn't show up until the early 1990s. And the right of workers to speak out without fear of retaliation didn't change until the hearing in March of 2000.
Few had any choice. Neither the unshielded workers nor the soldiers who stared directly into the explosion's blasting light. And afterwards, the consequences of radioactivity on the human organism were researched. Each bomb test brought with it a new round of human guinea pigs. The toll of victims over the years adds up to over 250,000. Occasionally, scientists backed by the Atomic Energy Commission forced prisoners to ingest plutonium. The radioactive fallout was swept away with a simple broom.
Decontamination, they called it, in case we had some radioactive particles on us. Well, we'd found out we hadn't. Not enough to bother. So I figured the big idea was to put the sand back on the desert so it could get another flying start at us. That was okay with me. I felt a lot different about the stuff on the way home than I did earlier that day.
I first came here in 1984 when I was an inspector for the state of New Mexico, looking at hazardous waste disposal. We weren't able to regulate the nuclear waste disposal, but we could regulate the toxic chemicals. What we found was a culture of neglect, a culture that had grown up in the dark, a culture that would just pour toxic chemicals in by the ton into shafts dug into this soft rock. We set about to change that. We're still working on it. What you see is nuclear waste in tents awaiting shipment elsewhere, but underneath the tents there's over 10 million cubic feet of nuclear waste.
Area G, the laboratory's radioactive waste dump, was once an Indian sacred site. New Mexico, #1 in nuclear weapons, #1 in poverty. Billboards along the highway announce the disquieting truth. The billboards are the creation of Greg Mello. It started here, let's stop it here.
Haven't seen you for a long time.
I know, you good?
Where you been? What have you been doing?
I've been working too hard.
You making this stuff?
Yes, but it's
the pits.
It is the pits. We all know that.
That's great.
Others must know it too.
Oh, this is real nice.
Their brochure said, science is your life, but we decided to...
you changed that to nuclear weapons science.
Right, and we put 3 labs here, all 3 labs.
Okay.
And on the back, we took their recruitment language and we explained it. Because the young people who are being recruited, they don't have any idea that Los Alamos makes nuclear weapons. Can you believe that? So, you know, people have, friends of ours have gone to the recruitment meetings, and they interview the people coming out, and they ask them, do you know that Los Alamos makes nuclear weapons or designs nuclear weapons? They say, well, no, that was never really discussed.
This is
so,
great.
I'm hoping you will hand these out to your visitors.
I get a lot of people from all over the world here, and those will get wide distribution. Greg, come on over here. I want to show you all these slides.
What slides?
Look at here.
Ooh, those are nice.
We were at Salvage one day, and this was under a big pile of stuff.
These are outstanding.
This is when we were testing in the atmosphere yet.
Two lonely activists page through a catalogue of colorful explosions bearing cheerful names. Destruction prettified by words. It started with Trinity. Little boy fell on Hiroshima and fat man on Nagasaki. A new series of nuclear weapons is called a new generation. The bomb builders insist upon being called designers. When death is at stake, they play with language. Was it Bravo or was it Priscilla? What pretty names annihilated those pretty South Pacific islands? Black Mesa, a sacred mountain. Men and women of the Teva Pueblo fought here against the Spaniards in the 16th century. Black Mesa lies between the pueblos San Ildefonso and Santa Clara, at the foothills of Los Alamos. Today, the laboratory trades with its Indian neighbors' workplaces in exchange for contaminated earth. When the scientists of the Manhattan Project arrived, they were greeted in a friendly manner. For the indigenous inhabitants, the bomb seemed a mad, impossible fantasy. But they would soon learn that the whites had another vision, that they could realize death and destruction on a scale unimaginable to the Indian way of thinking.
Santa Clara Pueblo, where I grew up, is about 10 miles away from Los Alamos, down the mountain from where Los Alamos is located. I have lived my life, all of my life actually, in the shadow of Los Alamos. My father worked here, my uncles and aunts worked up in Los Alamos. It was a very frightening place. It was a feeling of the world might blow up any moment, And of course, that was what happened in the 40s in a way, was that the world did blow up. One of my sisters would be so frightened that all we had to say to her was atomic bomb, and she would scream and shriek and hide under a bed because it was so frightening. But it was just a few miles away from us that the whole thing was happening.
Between the pre-Columbian petroglyphs, hidden under lichens, peeps the formula E equals mc squared. Einstein's formula anonymously hewn into stone some 50 years ago. Albert Einstein realized in his later years that he had discovered the key to creation's destruction. Oppenheimer and his colleagues detonated the first atomic bomb, although they were uncertain whether the chain reaction would ignite and consume the Earth's entire atmosphere.
Because in Pueblo thinking, there is the idea that everything works in opposites. That everything, if there is one thing, the primary goal in life is to find out what the opposite of that is. And it's a very dualistic sort of system, because the way that works is that if you know that there is one thing and that thing has an opposite, then you don't get focused on just one way of looking at the world or one way of being, but seeing that, no, to anything there is an opposite. And certainly here, Los Alamos and the Pueblo world are worlds apart. They are such that there's very little understanding. And I know that the people who founded Los Alamos, the people who work at Los Alamos, live at Los Alamos, do not have any idea at all of what the world is that they came into.
Since 1998, the Los Alamos National Laboratory has used an Indian idea as the title to its annual environmental report for the 7th generation. In the report, we learn that the laboratory will follow a concept borrowed from the great law of peace of the Iroquois Confederacy. Whatever we do today, it dare not endanger the 7th generation to come. That same year, 1998, a biological warfare alarm device was to undergo testing. Bacteria were to be released into the westerly wind and carried into the Indian pueblos. The experiment was top secret until someone leaked it to the press. The test was aborted.
In 1999, they planned this release of bacteria. They tell everybody it's safe. But they always do it kind of in, oh, by the way, or, oh, we just, well, we were going to tell you eventually about this. And then they released, and if they would have released the bacteria, of course, we don't know. We had no idea what could have happened, and neither did they. They had no idea what to expect. And it goes all the way back to July 16th, 1945. All those scientists, all those so-called greatest minds of the world of the time, all sitting around at Trinity's site, near Trinity's site, 200 miles as a crow flies from here in Santa Fe, thinking about, do we really know how big an explosion? Do we know what the effects are going to be? What do we really know about this? This is the first time we've ever tried it out. Well, it's the first time they were going to release bacteria.
We've been here for many hundreds of years in this area, and we're not going to move. So anything that does occur in that sense, not related to biological, it could be related to biological warfare, or any release that happens up there in Llano, it's going to impact us, and we're not going to leave. This has been our home for many generations, grandfathers have grown up here, lived and died, and taught us how to live, and that's where we're basically at now. And we're trying to keep that our heritage and our people going forward. And for us to have to leave the area because of something that would occur up there at Llano would be devastating to us. That would be the end of our people.
As we talk about the contamination, back in 1992, we were being told that our groundwater, which is about 2,200 feet below to 2,500 below, was not going to be impacted for ages to come. Within 6 months of being told in March, by July, middle of July, end of July, 1st of August of that year, there was a report that came out that the groundwater was contaminated. We were finding trace amounts of tritium and whatnot.
Water in the Southwest is such a precious thing because it's so rare. The scene here is unusual for the Southwest. I think that's why we came up with the idea that the creative force in the universe is something that we call the O-Wa-Ha. O is water, Wa is the wind, Ha is breath. The water, wind, breath, because those are the elements that we live with, and we know that we can't live without them.
The Spaniards named the river that flows through New Mexico from north to south the Rio Grande. This river too is polluted with radioactive substances. For the Indians, it is a crime against creation to desecrate water.
And to know that we can't just touch it or drink it the way it is, the way it moves, but that it carries things that may be death for us.
Many centuries before Area G contaminated the mesa, Indians had carved a picture into the stone. Avanyu, the horned water serpent. She is the protector of the springs. Those who poison water's gift of life bade her vengeance. Avanyu, the water serpent, transforms into Avanyu the fire serpent and attacks the water's destroyer. Indian elders often warned lab management. They received no response. In the world of formulas, myth is powerless.
Avanyu is the water serpent, and it is a horned serpent, and it is found on many of our designs of the Pueblo pottery. Avanyu comes from the water and is very much respected because it focuses on life. Water, as we know, is life. And at the current location of the Avanyu on the walls of the mesa, ironically, is right below Area G, which is the storage, long-term, short-term storage of nuclear waste from Los Alamos National Laboratory. And we are forbidden from going up there to pay homage to Avanyu in the sense that we were doing before, prior to World War II and prior to the fencing. It is very significant in our oral history and our oral language and legends that if we disturb Avanyu, the things that have happened to this point are going to continue. The contamination of our lands, the fire that happened in May of 2000 are just prime examples, even though science And Western European science will tell us that the fire was started by man, yes, but nature controlled it. And those are warnings that are there, and if they're not taken to heed, worse things will follow.
The Great Inferno of May 2000. We were waiting for it, the Indians tell us.
But notice the surrounding hills. It's all burned off. The entire panorama is all burned off. That was a real disaster, that fire. 400 families lost everything. Everything. Not only their houses, but their recipes, their books, their photographs, their beds, chairs, tables, dishes, everything gone. It was terrible.
The artist Erika Wanamaker scours the black hole salvage. She drives up from Santa Fe regularly to discover material. She changes relics from the nuclear age and evidence of the Great Fire into prophetic apocalyptic art.
Oh, yeah.
Like the natives, she also attributes the fire that set Los Alamos in flames to the revenge of Avanu.
Weird. We could just put this up on the wall, this one. Yeah, just hang this up in the office. This is just too good. So the way it'll get busted.
What do you see in it?
Oh, I don't know, it just looks great. This looks great like that.
It's a mushroom cloud?
Actually, it looks a little kind of little snaky, doesn't it?
Snake and animal?
Little Avanu, you know?
Yeah.
A little bit. And it's burned into the top of the box. These pieces are made from, each of these knives is made from different elements that were burned in the fire at Los Alamos. This blade is aluminum, this is aluminum. The aluminum was from car wheels that melted and ran down the street. The idea of Avanu and the fire was really important, especially with these materials. The materials were so powerful themselves. And I think of my work really alchemically. So the idea of having this material that had already gone through one of the alchemical processes, the purification process. And it was really interesting because even though they had been through the fire, they had a huge resonance. They were really powerful materials, just as raw materials. The raw aluminum, the raw melted tools, they really carried this idea of the story and the presence of Avanu. This room has X-ray light boxes. They're X-rays of sculptures that I've made, box pieces. And this piece is, I think, 15 or 16 X-rays of me that my veterinarian did because the other place wouldn't take X-rays of me. It's not medically ethical to take X-rays if you don't need them. And that's where the idea of the fool comes in. I'm in the position of the fool from the tarot card. I think the fool was really important in this work. I mean, sometimes, you know, the idea if you don't need them, well, what do you need in art? How much of a fool do you have to be in order to do your work? And I think sometimes, you know, you have to do what's necessary. And for me, it was being exposed to more radiation than I probably should have. But then I live in Santa Fe. I mean, I think we're exposed to more radiation than we know.
The circle of atomic artists is small. Small in the world and small in New Mexico. It was a big step when Erika Wanamaker's exhibition opened at Site Santa Fe, the Contemporary Art Center.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's funny because I didn't intend for it to look so Christian. I didn't intend for it to look so much like a rosary, but it just ended up that way with the 4 pieces of Trinitite. Yeah, Trinity site was named by Robert Oppenheimer. I think he had he was, to my point of view, he was the axis mundi for the whole piece. He connected heaven and earth for the Manhattan Project and the original construction of the bomb. I mean, he knew the mythic, all the mythic aspects. He named all the places. So he named it Trinity Site. And he was the one who at the moment after the bomb blast recited the Bhagavad Gita, the I am become death, shatter of worlds. He really understood that. So yeah, this piece corresponds to Trinity Site in that it looks like a crucifix, a rosary. The Trinity Site material, Trinitite, it's the only place it's found. Well, it's slightly radioactive, so it's in this protective glass. It's what, alpha particles, I think, which don't really travel through paper. So it's only slightly radioactive, but a little dangerous.
Serpentine curves went the mountain of secrets. The idea of an open laboratory of civil character that works together with the outside world on problems threatening the globe is the dream of Ed Grotius.
I would love to make the lab a world science center. They got the infrastructure, they got the staff, and they got the support personnel. They could do it, but we have to convince the politicians and the president that there is more to science than this nuclear thing.
The laboratory's nuclear weapons division is headed by Steve Younger. He once studied philosophy and today is categorically convinced that weapons of mass destruction preserve world peace.
Good morning, this is Steve Younger calling Patricia B. Tennis.
I call him Steve the Younger. You know, this is kind of a aristocratic or a kingly kind of thing. Steve the Younger. And I send him stuff all the time, but I presume he reads it, but I never get any feedback or anything. But I keep bugging him. This is my job. This is my life. To try and make these people in authority understand.
Steve Younger loves to explain the mission of Los Alamos to his staff and co-workers. One listener filmed Younger in 1998 and passed the video on to Greg Mellow's Institute and out into the world.
Now, Los Alamos weapons provide the ultimate defense of our nation and an umbrella over our allies around the globe. Let no one doubt that the United States does indeed have the capability to project overwhelming force in the defense of our national interest. Such a mistake would be fatal, and it will only be made once. Sometimes we forget how important the work that we do is. We have a critical role in history, and you think, gee, that's sort of overstating. It's not. We defend freedom on this planet. The United States, for whatever warts and imperfections we have, we try real hard to be the good guys. We try to help other countries. We're a very generous country. So a strong defense is absolutely critical, not just for the United States, but for this country to accept the role that has been thrust upon us by history. We didn't seek to have a major empire. We didn't seek to be the most powerful country on the planet. It sort of happened to us.
We have, at the top, you have these folks who are just a little bit nutty. And the system needs those people. The laboratory says, yes, many people in the laboratory say, we know that so-and-so is a nut. We're not sure how to control him now. Well, the guy before him was a nut too. They cycle them, through. The guy in charge of the nuclear weapons program integrates all these pieces, and he's got to be a true believer.
But what we do here is provide that bedrock, that technical bedrock, that the president can use to go forward and confidently negotiate treaties, that the Senate can use when they consider the ratification of those treaties. Now, Los Alamos has a duty to the nation to maintain this capability for as long as our government asks us to. So that's what I wanted to say. That's what we do here at Los Alamos. I'm proud of the work we do, and I'm proud of the people doing it, and I thank you for your attention.
I think it characterizes the nuclear business, and it's unforgiving. You can have an earthquake, you can have a hurricane, you can have an automobile accident, you could have a fire, you could have anything. But when that thing is over, it's over. But in the nuclear sense, it's never over. It's perpetual, it's everlasting.
Robert Oppenheimer and several members of the Manhattan Project later realized the ultimate consequences of their work and opposed the nuclear arms race. The nuclear age was created by humankind. Only by humankind can it be ended.